Alright, hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about how I do my hollow grinds. And as you can see here, this is an example of one of my hollow grinds on my last knife I did. So the most important step and the first step is layout. So you want to lay it out so you can get a consistent grind and a center line. So this is what I'm doing here. I'm marking my edge of the profiled knife blank, and I'm using a Sharpie and a drill bit that is the same diameter as the thickness. So in this case that's a 1/4 inch drill bit, and I flip it over and I scratch both sides so I get an even center line. And you see here there's my center line, and that's important just because if you have a grind that's off center, then you're going to have more prone to warping and just have a weaker blade overall. So now I'm setting in just how high I want my grinds to go, and that's just for guidance during your grinds, just to compare with both sides. So now I'm starting with a 36 grit ceramic Norton Blaze belt. And these belts probably run around $12, I want to say. So they're expensive belts, but they last a while and they hog off a lot of material, so they're worth it. So now I'm going, and you start off with a fairly steep angle, even close to 45 degrees really. What you want to do is you want to start and you want to bring your grind towards your center line. So that's what I'm doing here, and I'm at my second highest speed right now, and that's just so I can rough in and get a pretty consistent plunge line. So if you start at a slower speed, you can get a good plunge line set. That's what I'm doing here. Um, so like I said, you want to start bringing that center line closer. You're grinding towards your center line, and then once you start getting closer to your center line, then you can start working that grind back towards to achieve the height that you want. And this is really just achieved by your angle and which way you apply your pressure. So if you see now, I'm holding it at a less steep angle, and I'm applying the pressure to the back side of the blade towards the spine and away from the edge. And what's that doing is that is pushing the grind down, and that's pushing it higher up, so I'll get a higher grind. And you can see right there I'm working on setting a good plunge line in. And another trick for getting a clean plunge line is you can adjust the tracking of the grinder and have the belt hang off maybe like 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch off of the wheel, and then that will give a nice clean plunge line. And then you just adjust it the other direction when you flip over. And so here I'm applying even pressure, and then you can see I'm doing pretty constant dips in water, and that's just to cool it off so I can handle it and not burn any of the carbon to affect it. That's not as important right now in the roughing stage, but especially after heat treat, you want to make sure that you keep your knife and the blade cool so you don't ruin the temper. And you can see I just keep applying a constant pressure down towards the spine. And when you go in, you first want to be pretty hesitant and just sort of find where your hollow is of the wheel, and then match it up and then apply pressure. And one thing, you just have to have confidence. You can't walk up and be intimidated by the grinder, or you're going to have wobbly lines. You got to walk up, keep it steady, and then just work with it. And you can see I have a slight upward motion when I get towards the tip. I just sort of swoop just a little bit. I don't do anything super drastic, otherwise you're actually going to grind off more material from the tip. If you just swoop it significantly, you're going to have a spot right where the start of the curve begins, and you're going to lose a lot more material there, and you're going to have a weak spot in the blade, and that can lead to disastrous effects during heat treat. So you just want a very slight, and don't go all the way to the tip, like you see I'm doing here. Usually you want to start from the plunge line and work all the way over. But here I'm just cleaning up some spots to even out the grind here. So I have some spots that are a little lower, and I'm just evening out the height of my grind and then just towards the center line. Don't go all the way towards the center line when you're grinding. You want to leave about the thickness of a dime. That's general rule of thumb. But I'd say for a hollow grind, you might want to leave it a little thicker, because the way a hollow grind works on your contact wheel, you actually have a hollow in your blade, and so the edge is actually a little thicker than the center part of the hollow, so that can make it even more prone to warping. So like I said, I would leave a little thicker than a dime, but a dime should be safe. And the biggest thing here is just keeping it constant and a consistent grind going on. So like you can see, there's just a lot of back and forth checking, making sure your lines all line up, that they're all even, that you get a consistent height. A little bit about the grinder I'm using. It's a Coot 2x72 grinder, and it's a great little grinder. I'd recommend it, for the price especially. It's cheaper than say like a KMG or something, but it's still very well built. I have a 10-inch contact wheel on here, and for hollow grinding I'd really recommend a 10-inch as like a minimum for it. They sell 12 and 14-inch contact wheels. Coot doesn't, but stuff like KMG, like some Fear grinders, I want to say, you can get larger contact wheels for if you're going to do hollow grind. I hollow grind exclusively, and like you can see, I don't use any jigs or guards or work rests, so I freehand everything, but that just takes some practice. So I'd recommend like buying some mild steel and just practicing your grinds, and that comes with experience. So you can see now I'm working towards the tip, and that's something that sometimes you'll come back to and just work on the tip, to clean it up and fix it, because you don't want to take off too material, so you can focus on that by itself. Alright, so now we're moving on to doing the polish, and really just getting out those scratch marks from 36 grit belt and cleaning it up. So now I'm using a Norax 100 times belt, and that's about a 220 grit approximately. And I'm using it all kinds of places on my blade. I'm using it to clean up my plunge line, and then now you can see I'm cleaning up my ricasso area with it. And it just makes an overall really clean finish. And something with hollow grinds is that they are concave. So sanding them, like hand sanding them, it's a lot more difficult than say if you're doing something similar to say a Scandi or a flat grind. It's a lot harder to hand sand it due to it being concave. So I like cleaning it up with my grinder. So over here I'm using just that Norax belt, and I'm cleaning up both sides to get those scratch marks out for my 36 grit. And in between the Norax belt and my 36 grit, I usually go to like a 60 grit zirconia belt, and then move up to a 120 grit, and then I go to my 220. I lost the footage of that 60 grit and 120, but it's essentially the same thing you're watching here. I just progress up my grits. So I'm cleaning up, and just really, especially now, you want to be careful about how hot your blade gets. So I'm making sure to cool it a whole lot in between, because now you have the grind on both sides of the blade. So it's a lot thinner, and it can heat up a lot quicker. And then the finer the grit of the belt, the faster that it heats up as well, because it doesn't cut as efficiently. And now I'm just cleaning up my clip point on here. For the sake of the relevance of this video is on hollow grinds, so it's not really relevant, but you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just cleaning up pretty much all my areas to get a uniform grind and uniform grit scratch on my blade. So I'm going back trying to clean up my ricasso again. Ricassos are probably the worst area to clean up, because you got to keep it consistent. That's just what I'm trying to get here. And especially different types of steels. This is ADCR V2, and that steel just does not like hand sanding or filing. It's nothing like W2 or even 1095. Although 1095 is very difficult to work with too. I'd say I actually like 1095 better. W2 is one of my favorites. It's a lot easier steel to work with, but I have a lot of excess ADCR V2, so that's what I'm using in this one. And got to be real careful around the tip, especially in this stage. You don't want to take off too much material. And now I'm moving over to a 3M Trizact belt. This one's approximately 400 grit. And these belts are similar to like beater belts. They last a real long time. They give a really good finish. And during this, you can see I'm wiping off the blade. If these belts get wet, they disintegrate. And they can, I'm taking it to a bit of an extreme here, wiping it down. It'd be really fine. But anything like wet sanding or wet grinding would definitely ruin the belt. They'd disintegrate. So if you have any kind of like liquid coolant on your grinder, any kind of sprayer, I definitely take that off if you're going to use these belts. These belts are also expensive, but they're definitely worth the money. They last a long time to give a good finish. So I'm working up now, and I'm using lighter pressure in areas, heavier pressure in areas, just depending on where the different scratch marks are to get out. And I'm cleaning them up, and I can, depending on like if I have to move the line closer in or higher up the blade, depending on if I'm going towards the edge, if I'm going towards the spine or the grind line there, apply pressure in different areas. But at this point, it's a lot easier to get on the grinder and to go into your hollow because you have your full hollow there, so it fits the concavity of the hollow grind, matches up to your contact wheel, so it's really easy to move in there. And now I'm moving to a Scotch-Brite belt, and this is the Porsche Scotch-Brite belt. I currently have two. I have a medium. Yeah, I lied. This is a medium belt, and then I have a fine belt. The fine belt is blue. And these are really great belts. They create a good satin finish. And I only go up to the medium before heat treat. This is before heat treat polishing right now. And these belts run probably about $22, $25 in that range. They're extremely expensive belts, but they last a long time. They give a really good finish. And they really do beat hand sanding, especially for something like a hollow grind. When it comes to doing like my flat grinds or any kind of Scandi grinds, I definitely hand sand. But in this instance, whenever I do a hollow grind, I just use Scotch-Brite belts, and I get a really good satin finish. So that's what I'm using here. And Scotch-Brite belts will also heat up your blade really quickly. Just that's something to be cautious about, especially post-heat treat when you're getting your final satin finish on there. So just be cautious and make sure to dip it in water fairly often. And I'm cleaning up my Praso area. And like I said, these belts are great time savers. They're definitely worth the money. They last a long time. And now I'm moving to post-heat treat. So now I'm doing my post-heat treat. I'm getting off all of my oxides and where I had decopperization. I'm grinding that off to get clean steel underneath where I had a good temper. Now you have to be really careful that you're not going to rig your temper. So this is the time to be especially make sure you're dipping cold water over and over and cooling it off the whole way. Especially now because this is the thinnest that the blade's going to get. And you're going to take it down a little thinner to get to your final edge thickness now. So you need to be really careful about that and just make sure that you keep it nice and cool. Especially working areas around the tip and then areas towards your plunge line. I've noticed that's where you're going to heat it up the quickest. At least that's for me personally. And I'm using the Norax belt again, so I'm starting back at my 220 grit. And then over here, that's actually my Norax right there. But you just go and work it back up and just get off any of your scale and decarbonization, like I said. And just be really careful and watch the heat. And here you see I'm using like the nitro gloves. And I just use that to keep all the metal dust and everything out of my hands. But these gloves are great because you can still feel the heat, and that's important because you need to be able to feel if your blade's getting warm or heating up so you can cool it off. Otherwise, you'll ruin your temper and your heat treat, and you'd have to anneal it and then heat treat it again, which you don't want to do, especially if you've been grinding more because it's more prone to warping. So I'm moving up on my grits here, and I'm working on the other side. And you just got to be cautious with your plunge lines now, because you'd hate to ruin it after 75% of your work on the blade's done. You ruined one of your plunge lines. So I put my step pulleys in the slowest speed, which is about, I want to say, 575 surface feet per minute. And I don't know what the RPM is. I want to say it's maybe 1400 RPM that I'm running. And that just helps to really make sure that you don't mess up or do anything too quickly, remove too much material. You run it slower. Although the slower you run it, the less efficient the belt's going to cut, and you're going to be more likely to overheat the blade. And this is a J-Flex belt I'm using right here. These belts are a little cheaper. This is a 320 grit belt, and they're very flexible belts, so they really do get a nice even grind, especially fitting to a hollow. And I'm using that to clean up, and I'm going a lot more efficiently here. So I probably started around 120, and I did my Norax 220, and then I'm doing a 320 here with my J-Flex. And now I have a 400 grit belt. This is aluminum oxide, and they clog up. They're pretty cheap. They're not that great of belts, but just say I use them for sharpening a lot, and they're worth it. They're probably $3-4 belts. Uh, but if you're gonna do it for regular grinding, I would say go ahead and bite the bullet and buy more Trizag gator belts or Norax belts. They're gonna last a lot longer and give the overall better finish. And I'm cleaning up my ricasso area here, doing that kind of stuff. And now you can see, here's the cleaned up bevel. This is before I do any of my, this is before I do anything with the Scotch-Brite, really clean up and blend all my lines. Hollow grinds are more difficult to get those clean lines on, so those Scotch-Brite belts help a whole lot. So now I'm moving on to my Scotch-Brite belt here, and this is the medium grit Scotch-Brite belt. And these really help blend all of your lines and get a really nice satin finish on your blade. And now I'm doing this. This is post-heat treat, post-finish polish, and this is right after I etched my logo on. So I'm actually doing this to remove any kind of oxides that formed while etching my logo on. So I'm cleaning up my ricasso area with it, and then I'm also moving in and cleaning up and blending all my lines on my hollow grind as well. And this is another area, make sure that you have a bucket of water so you can cool down the blade a whole lot, because it's going to heat up and you don't want to ruin your temper or your heat treat, especially when the blade is this close to being finished. It's essentially finished or ready to be finished. Other than a handle, if it were sharpened, it's a knife at this point. So make sure that you keep it nice and cool so you don't ruin your temper. And these belts are really great. They just blend all your lines in. And now you can sort of see a close-up of all the lines that have been blended in. And you can see all the hollow grinds. It's all cleaned up now. The lines are blended and you have a nice satin finish across the blade. And then you can see my maker's mark is etched in there. It's on both sides, so just make sure and keep it nice and cool it off. And thanks guys for watching. Like and subscribe. If you have any questions, toss them down in the comments and I'll get back to you. Thanks.